Hello. Wow, it's great to see all of you. It's been a minute. Some faces I recognize, some I don't. I'm actually face blind, so I don't recognize any of your faces. That's why I'm always staring at your badges. But hi there, I'm Rachel Nabors, formerly of the React core team, head of developer education at AWS Amplify, Microsoft Edge mascot, and unrequested web animations evangelist. All roles I've had, not necessarily in that order. And today, I'm here to share with you a great story that I didn't get to tell because it happened during the pandemic. And I like to say that react.dev and react.dev were my pandemic babies. So thank you so much for coming to hear their story. All right, let me see if my little clicker is still working. You were working, are you not? Do you not believe in me? There we go, it's the wrong arrow. All right, sweet. So way back when, before the dystopia that we know is today, in 2018, I got into Vue because the community felt inviting. And I found React pretty hard to learn. I'd sit down for a course, and 6 hours later, I was like, why am I still messing with these configurations? I can't get this to work. But I realized that most six-figure salaries weren't asking for Vue or Ember, which was where I saw people like me and felt friendly and enjoyed those education materials. Most of those six-figure salary jobs needed React. That's a pretty high barrier to entry if you can't even learn it, right? By the way, that's me at the first VueConf US in New Orleans cosplaying Kylo Ren. Don't ask, it was an animation themed Sleeping Beauty in space. It was pretty cool. Only time I ever gave that talk. So React was hard to learn even for people with computer science degrees. I heard over and over again, that it was tough, it was difficult, that the materials had to be read a couple of times over to really get them. I thought to myself, man, if only React were as easy to learn as Vue, more people like me could get six-figure jobs too. That would be pretty sweet, right? So I was like, I'm pretty good at making educational materials. I've done some writing for MDN, some courses and some workshops. I'm going to go join the React team. And I did that in 2019 in London. I joined as a developer advocate / docs engineer hybrid. Pro tip, don't take jobs that are hybrid roles at big tech companies. It just gets, it's a nightmare. It becomes a real like, who's on first? Your manager or that manager kind of thing. Don't do that, but I was everything. All right, I joined because I wanted to democratize React education and pull that big lever for millions of developers around the world. But before I could work on React, I had the task of turning around React Native's docs. You may have heard of this particular site, react.native.dev. It was not always known as react.native.dev. It used to be known as github.io/Facebook/ Yes, it was very difficult to get to it. So where did I start? I started by talking to you, the React Native community. I sent out surveys, I had one-on-ones. I did what any person who's been a UXer for 3 years in their life, their career would do. And I learned the following. People wanted to see more refreshers on React. A lot of people were coming into React Native from iOS, Android, and other backgrounds. More than half the people visiting the site, for instance. And so they come, and the site said, React Native, it's like React, but for native platforms. And then it's like, okay, now I have to go to the React site, and I've got to learn everything about JavaScript and React, and I'll be back in 8 months. Goodbye. That was a terrible experience. That was a terrible experience, right? I was just like, no, we can do better. So refresher material, we needed that. More visual content. Your doc site does not have to be essays. I don't encourage it. More in-depth content on specialized topics like security and testing. And of course, up-to-date component and API docs. This was a real issue. They were not getting updated. They were not a part of process releases. And my favorite, interactive code, because what was so hard about getting started with React? You had to get the app working first. You just want to, you're probably working in someone else's app in the first place. Why you got to get a completely fake app that's nothing like the app that you're going to be working on running so you can just learn the syntax? It doesn't make any sense. All right, so that was the mandate. Also learned through these surveys that 41% of React Native devs come from a mobile background. That is to say, they are completely unfamiliar with all the terms and jargon that we use in the web development community, of which I am a local. So we built in literal context switchers to the docs. This is the first step. So if you needed the explanation with an Android spin, we had that for you. And we had it with web. It was pretty cool. Wanted to speak to the learner's individual experience. Added that React refresher and interactive code sandboxes, courtesy of Expo. Thank you very much for that partnership. People love it. So now you could mess around with React Native and see a preview right there in the documentation. And because the docs weren't built from the source code, that meant running a docs drive with the community to make sure that every component had a working example and every API reference was complete. Even brought in experts as guest writers, might have seen some of them presenting today, to patch the missing documentation, and added colorful illustrations that I may or may not have drawn that turned out to be very popular in follow-up surveys. react.dev launched July 23rd, 2020. And this effort lifted the documentation's thumbs up rate by 70%. The whole effort took about 6 months total. And as you can see, that's a pretty big lift. Many thanks to the community contributors who made it happen. Whew, so how do you follow up something like that? Well, with that success, it was time to move on to React docs. Now these were another story. I just want it to be known that I have a written record that the effort kicked off May 27th, 2020, the very start of the pandemic. Drum roll. And of course, I kicked it off with some surveys. Like with React Native, I wanted to start with the community. And even though I may be a part of the web community, that does not mean I know everything about the React community, its educators, its learners, its pundits, as well as its shopkeepers. And the results were similar to React Native, with a few exceptions. We wanted to move to function components first, because that was the official recommended way that the React team was moving forward, but the docs were largely class-based. Made it really hard. First you learned classes, then you learned hooks, then you learned React Native. Oh my God, the number of hurdles we were putting people through. Adding a hooks reference. The hooks docs existed more in essay form, but it was really hard to just jump in and be like, I need the page for use effect. Where is that page? There were 3 pages. More visual content, I mean, obviously. And of course, interactive code. Like, can I just get to hello world in 10 minutes, not 10 hours? All right. So this all started as doodles in a sketchbook. Dan and I like to communicate in sketches. I have a lot of these, but we only have like 4 minutes left. This ended up as a huge spreadsheet of new content that needed to be created. This was not just tweaking existent content like React Native. This was an absolute greenfield burn down. This was more like writing a book about React than it was just updating some docs on a website. That was a lot of fun to communicate to stakeholders both at the company and within the community. Thank you for your patience. Not where I anticipated applause, but I'll take it. We went to beta December 8th, 2020. Wait, is it 2020 or 2021? We're not talking about that. Anyway, launched with illustrations, yours truly again, and a diagramming system by Maggie Appleton, because my diagrams were very sketchy. This is much clearer to read. She did a great job of turning our doodles of diagrams into something that could be legible to the human eye. And of course, interactive sandboxes made using Code Sandbox. Now these were a real game changer because we wanted to level up how people were learning React using a little something called retrieval practice. Studies show that cramming doesn't work. What makes knowledge stick is repeatedly doing the thing, like having a job. The best way to learn is to have a job, not to go to college. Says my mom, who didn't want to get me enough money to go to college. That's another story. We'll talk about that later. But one of the reasons I'm so passionate about making educational materials free, sometimes you just don't get to walk that path. So, spacing out this practice, making people do real things, helps it stick, helps it be recalled in the heat of the moment. And that's why these sandboxes let us ship something called challenges at the bottom of each lesson that present real-world React goofs that you might encounter on the job with hints that walk you through how you can think about it. Dan Abramov himself laid hands on each of these. It's like getting mentored by the best. I love them. There's nothing like them out there. You just can't top it. It's directly from the experts. All right, so this all sounds lovely. I'm sure it looked great in corporate presentations at Docs Day, et cetera, internally. But how did we know if any of it was working? Well, once again, we asked real people. Real people. In alpha testing, we found that users were 3 times more likely to recommend the new React documentation in beta than they were the existing React documentation. I'll take that as a win, thank you. So, March 16th, 2023, the docs were mission complete. They had the tutorials, they had the API references, they were ready to go. I was no longer at Meta, but I am that powerful at TPM that I'm shipping things even when I'm not at a company anymore. Classes folks out there, I can hear you going, oh no, where will I find that? It's all right, we made a pressed flower of the old docs. You can find them at the legacy site. URL's on the screen. Don't worry, you'll still get your class references, but we're not updating them anymore. They stay that way forever. Legacy. Ship the new react.dev landing page. Cha-cha. It has 600 plus new interactive examples. Get your retrieval practice in. The illustrations, the interactive sandboxes, the user feedback that we gained by working with React Native and its community on react.native.dev had a huge impact on how we built react.dev itself and how we approach teaching the world to think in React. The two work together so that you can get better faster and become the kind of reliable engineer on your team that you would like to be going forward in your career. All right. So, since we went from beta to the full launch, 8 million learners had access to that content while it was being finished. That's the importance of actually launching previews of your book before you publish. We were able to iterate directly on their feedback, and these people had access to that information and hopefully got nice 6-figure jobs that they are not being laid off from currently. And it is our extreme hope that you will love them both and use them regularly on your own React journey. Whew. If you want to talk developer education, you can find me poodling about at the rest of the conference. I love to talk about how people learn. I'm available for consulting, jobs, and of course, the occasional StarCraft tournament. Thank you so much for your help and answering all those surveys. Oh my gosh, thank you.